So, as we talk about suffering here most weeks, as an inescapable part of human life, from the moment we are born until the moment we die, we encounter a range of challenges, pains, difficulties, and yet, contrary to most of our cultural messaging, suffering, where it is perceived as purely negative, holds the potential to be one of our greatest teachers. From a Buddhist perspective, suffering is not only inevitable, but it's also transformative when approached with mindfulness, insight, and compassion. And I hope to make the case for that this morning. It is through suffering that one of our primary ways we cultivate resilience. Resilience, the strength to endure, to adapt, and to grow in the face of life's adversities. And resilience is critical when we're facing life's inevitable storms in terms of managing the suffering that comes from those storms. But resilience, in this sense, is not merely about surviving hardship. It's also about discovering the wisdom and the inner strength inherent in our response to these difficult experiences. You'll recall that the Buddha's teachings begin with the First Noble Truth, which is the truth of dukkha, translated loosely as suffering. But it's much broader than just suffering. It refers to every fundamental dissatisfaction, unease, the instability that permeates our existence, anything that we want to avoid, anything that we want to push away can come under that umbrella of dukkha. Now, this doesn't mean that life is nothing but pain. Of course not. Rather that, but what it does mean is that even moments of joy and pleasure are tinged with the awareness of impermanence and change, and which can lead to discontent when we cling to them as though they were permanent. The Buddha identified three main types of suffering that I want to revisit a little bit this morning. The first one is the suffering of suffering. This refers to the unavoidable physical and emotional pain that we experience in our lives. Everyone experiences it. Might include illness, loss, disappointment, the list goes on and on. But it's the suffering of suffering because we can't escape it. It's unavoidable. The second is the suffering of change. And this arises from the impermanence of all things. Even pleasures and joys are fleeting. And when they pass, we can often feel loss or longing. We really want them to last. This suffering we can address, and we're going to come back to it in a minute. This one is some that we have some tools to look at. And then the third one that he talked about is a little more nuanced. It's what's called the suffering of conditioned existence. This is the most subtle form, and it arises from the very nature of existence and conditioned habits of mind. It's often called existential suffering. It's just the suffering that's always kind of bubbling under the surface, and we often don't even notice it. But it really comes under the heading of impermanence, the idea that nothing ever is going to last, even if we don't articulate it. This one we can also address with our practice. And while the acknowledgement of suffering may seem pessimistic, and it does often in our culture get labeled that way, our Buddhist practice reframes it as an opportunity for growth and liberation, which is really a radical idea in Western culture. Suffering is not an obstacle to be avoided or run away from. It's not something we want to get into a wrestling match with because we are going to lose. If we try to push it away, run from it, distract from it, yes, we may be able to succeed temporarily, but ultimately it's going to come back around. It is instead a reality to be faced, to be understood, and to be ultimately managed. And this understanding is the key to resilience. Because what resilience does, it shifts the way we relate to hardship. It doesn't get rid of it. It changes our relationship with it. We go from resistance to acceptance. We go from avoidance to transformation. Because resilience at its core is the ability to adapt and recover from adversity. Not escape it, not get rid of it, not prevent it, but adapt and recover from it. It is not resilience is not the absence of pain or difficulty. Rather, it is the capacity to face challenges with courage, with flexibility, and with strength. Now, again, from the Buddhist perspective, and this is again contrary to most of our Western values and teachings, resilience arises not in spite of suffering, but because of suffering. What I'm saying there is that it's through our struggles that we developed the qualities necessary to endure it, necessary to thrive despite it. So think about this. Just as a tree with deep roots, I love this metaphor, can withstand strong winds, a person who has faced and learned from suffering possesses the inner resources to navigate any future storms. You may know this as I do. Some of the emotionally strongest people I know and have interacted with have been through hell and persevered. They have really faced their demons and come out on the other side. One of the central teachings, as you know, is the truth of impermanence. Everything in life is transient. Our joys, our sorrows, our relationships, and of course, even our own bodies. And suffering often forces us to confront this reality. When we come up against this kind of impermanence, we suffer. And so there it is, right in our face. And while this can be painful, it also is an opportunity to develop resilience by letting go of our attachments, by letting go of our expectations that things should be other than they are. When we cease clinging to the illusion of permanence, we already are becoming more adaptable and open to change. We just have to let go of that illusion of permanence. And it is deep in all of us. You know, just as our muscles grow stronger through resistance and effort, our hearts and minds grow stronger when we face the challenges of suffering. The old cliche says, no pain, no gain. And boy, is that true in terms of cultivating resilience in the face of suffering. When we face adversity, we have the opportunity to cultivate the qualities of patience, of courage, and determination. This is not an easy path, but these qualities are the foundation of resilience. And in fostering that and cultivating that, it allows us to persevere in the face of great difficulty. Doesn't mean we don't suffer, but suffering, if we allow it, will soften the heart and deepen our empathy for others. You know, we have a choice here. Suffering, when we're confronted with it, if we choose, can make us bitter, make us fall into victimhood if we go that route. But if we choose to go the other route and let it soften the heart, we become more aware of the universal nature of suffering, that everybody suffers. And this can help lead us to cultivating greater compassion for ourselves and for others. And what I love about this is that compassion in turn strengthens resilience because it fosters a sense of purpose. It fosters a sense of connection. You know, one of the most profound ways that suffering builds resilience is by prompting us to seek meaning. When we encounter hardship, we're often forced to reflect on our values, reflect on our priorities, reflect on our purpose in life. That's what I mean by seeking meaning. The process is seen as an opportunity to deepen our practice, to move closer to freedom. Because we're in the midst of it, we really have to look at, you know, what are our values? What are our priorities? How do we want to live this life? And by finding some meaning in suffering, not just that it's a terrible thing that happens to us, we transform it from a source of despair and hopelessness into a catalyst for growth. And while the teachings of the Buddha provide a philosophical framework for understanding suffering, they are also deeply practical, which is why I teach practical Dharma, because the Buddha offered us concrete tools for working with suffering that by its very nature fosters resilience. So let's just review quickly what those some of those tools are. And you're going to know all these. These are familiar to you. Mindfulness, the practice of being fully present with whatever arises, including our suffering, without judgment or resistance. Fully present with mindfulness. When we experience suffering, mindfulness allows us, when we step back, when we pause, to observe it with clarity and equanimity, not just with impulsive reactivity. Got to get away, got to get away, got to make it stop. That is not going to be skillful. Instead of reacting impulsively to suffering or trying to escape our pain, we sit with it, we investigate it, we look at its very nature. And this helps us develop the mental and emotional flexibility that we need when the next adversity presents itself. So that's the mindfulness piece. Next, of course, is the practice of letting go, because so much of our suffering arises from attachment. Clinging to the things we want to cling to and hold on to, and pushing away and resisting the things we don't like. Both of those tremendous sources of suffering, little ways, big ways. By practicing non-attachment, by letting go, we reduce the intensity of our suffering, and by virtue of that, develop greater resilience. Now, letting go, let me remind you, does not mean giving up or becoming indifferent. It's not passivity. It means simply accepting things as they are and responding skillfully rather than with reactivity. Then we have compassion and loving kindness. Cultivating compassion for ourselves and others is a powerful way to build resilience. When we approach our suffering, whether ours or someone else's, with kindness, especially with our own, rather than self-criticism, we create space for healing. We create space for building resilience. When we start beating ourselves up and hitting ourselves with a second arrow, we're just going to continue the suffering. Likewise, extending compassion to others helps us feel connected, reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles. There is something very reassuring about knowing that, because very often when we're suffering, we feel like we're the only one. And then, of course, we have the Noble Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path offers practical guidance, a roadmap, if you will, for living a life that minimizes unnecessary suffering, emphasizes unnecessary, and fosters resilience. When we practice right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, we align ourselves with the principles of wisdom, principles of ethics, and mental discipline. And then there's our meditation practice, the on the cushion stuff. It's a cornerstone and a powerful tool for building resilience, because with meditation, we develop the ability to calm the mind, focus our attention, and gain insight into the nature of our suffering. See where we get attached, see where we get triggered, see where we get hooked. We're not just flying on autopilot. We're gaining insight into the nature of our suffering. And over time, this practice helps us cultivate a sense of inner peace and stability, even in the face of external challenges. Ultimately, suffering has the potential to transform us in profound ways, because it breaks down this illusion that we all carry of control, that we can control outcomes and predict them. It breaks down the illusion of permanence, forcing us painfully, reluctantly though, to confront the reality of life as it is. And yes, this process is painful, but it is also liberating. It is freeing. By facing our suffering with courage and mindfulness, we emerge from it stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. You know, in Buddhism, in the Buddhist teaching, this transformation is often likened or compared to the process of refining gold. Just as gold must be subjected to intense heat to remove impurities, we must pass through the fires of suffering to uncover and develop our true strength and potential. This is not to glorify suffering or suggest that it is desirable, but to recognize its inevitability and see it as a catalyst for growth. Not as a catalyst to go hide our head in the sand. Suffering, while difficult and painful, is an unavoidable and integral part of the human experience. And from a Buddhist perspective, it is not something to be avoided, something to be feared, but to be embraced. Almost paradoxically, that sounds as an opportunity for transformation. Through suffering, we learn to let go of our attachments. We learn to cultivate inner strength. We learn to develop compassion and wisdom. It is an extremely powerful teacher. So resilience then is not simply the ability to endure hardship, but the capacity to grow and thrive through developing resilience. By practicing mindfulness, compassion, and the Buddha's teachings, we transform our relationship with suffering. We discover the profound resilience that lies within all of us. So in this way, suffering is not an obstacle, but a path that leads to the ultimate goal of freedom and peace. You know, as you've heard the expression, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And through understanding and working with our suffering, we unlock the potential to live with greater freedom, with greater joy, and certainly with greater resilience.